Yes.
The hour of 10:15 having arrived, I'm going to call this meeting of the Taxes Committee to order for March 3rd, 2026. March 4th, 2026. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from March 3rd, 2026. Vice Chair Joy, would you like to move the minutes?
So moved.
Vice Chair Joy moved the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion prevails. The minutes for March 3rd, 2026 are adopted. We have 3 bills on our agenda today. First, I'm going to move that House File 3611 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill. Welcome to the committee, Representative Finke. Please go ahead and describe your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members, for hearing my bill. This is my first taxes bill. I'm happy to be here with you today. And I will just move forward in the interest of your time as a committee. So 3611 is a bill that allows a state income tax withholding deduction for damages that are won by individuals in lawsuits against federal agents like ICE or CPB. We currently offer these state tax withholdings for claims of sexual assault. We offer them for claims that are physical violence caused by the agents. But this would say emotional financial awards. We know there are many, many ways that individuals were harmed during the recent ICE and CPB activity in the state of Minnesota. And we want to make sure that we are taking care of all of those people and not letting their tax deductions taken from them when that was caused by the government. So that's the bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Representative Finke. There aren't any testifiers. Is there anyone present who signed up ahead of time? Is there anyone present who wishes to testify on House File 3611? Not seeing any. We'll move to member questions or comments. All right. No member questions or comments. Representative Finke, any closing remarks for us?
I think this is a good bill, and I hope that we will find a way to get it in the tax bill. Thanks for your time.
Wonderful. Now you see how hard it is to present a bill in taxes. It's not so bad, right, Rep. Finke?
Much better than anywhere else I've ever done a bill.
Hey, now that's what we like to hear. Okay, thank you so much, Representative Finke. With that, House File 3611 is laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill. Next up, Representative Hanson is here with House File 3909. I'm going to move that House File 3909 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill. Representative Hanson, welcome back. We'll still consider this your committee, even though we unfortunately lost you to Commerce. But welcome back. We're thrilled to see you. Please go ahead and describe your bill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. House File 3909 proposes a 50% tax on the gross receipts of detention centers operated by private, non-governmental entities. Please stay with me here. I really do believe that this proposal can bring us together across the aisle as a bipartisan opportunity to address all of our constituents' concerns about things that they care about. And I hope I can do my part today to shine some light on how this bill is one that can empower us as policymakers to address the various issues that Minnesotans have asked us to tackle. My goal here is to leave you with a dynamic and properly prismed perspective of an issue that is frankly really easy to see with tunnel vision or even favoritism, bias, or preference for one political ideology over another. And I hope we can all set that aside for just the next few minutes because after all, this is the tax committee where no topic is off the table and what you do impacts everyone, or at least it should. So at a time when addressing the misuse of taxpayer dollars is of particular interest to many Minnesotans, bills like the one before you today will call for real independent thinking and critical discernment to fracture the fervent convictions that many people put at the forefront of their approaches and decision-making when talking about anything that regards ICE in this day and age. So I understand why people are skeptical of bills that your researchers or others or critics may have framed as anti-ICE, but the truth here is that bills like the one before you today can help us come together to respond with a yes and solution to Minnesotans with concerns for either, both, or all of the issues that this touches on. Supporting proposals like this empowers elected officials to dynamically answer the call from Minnesotans who are asking us to tackle the issues most important to them. They're asking us to address the rampant misuse of taxpayer dollars. They're asking us to address unprecedented corporate profits while they're struggling to make ends meet. They're asking us to do our part to make up for the economic impacts that ICE's tactics encumbered on Minnesotans. They're asking us to prevent future human, civil, and constitutional violations that ICE has established as their version of business as usual in the communities where the vast majority of Minnesotans and taxpayers call home. This bill would more than likely end up impacting one or both of the largest private contractors for ICE or the largest owner of private detention facilities in America. It's important to highlight that neither of those companies are ICE because both are non-governmental entities. However, both are publicly traded REITs who turn a profit on the substandard housing of humans and whose business decisions reflect on ICE and the government, even though they operate independently. So the two companies that this primarily comes up when we're talking about this issue, GEO Group is one. They're the preferred contractor of ICE, and their primary shareholders include BlackRock, Vanguard, Pentwater, and the typical financial cabal. In 2024, their revenue only increased $10 million from the prior year. In 2025, their profits were $2.63 billion, which was up $210 million from '24. So this 21 times increase in their revenue profits, or revenue increases, was entirely attributed to $520 million, or $500 million of new contracts that they had struck with the government. In 2026, they are projected to increase their profits between $270 to $470 million, reaching over $3 billion total. That's GEO Group. The other group we can talk about is CoreCivic. CoreCivic is the largest owner of private detention facilities in America, and their primary shareholders again include BlackRock, Vanguard, River Road Asset Management, Cooper Creek, State Street, and again, a similar familiar financial cabal. In 2024, their revenue increased $60 million from the previous year. In '25, their profits or their revenue was $2.21 billion, which was up $250 million from the year before, a 4 times increase from the previous year's increase. Major banks have divested from everything in CoreCivic, including JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, US Bank, PNC, Truist, Barclays, Fifth Third, et cetera, because their shareholders were morally outraged and expressed their concerns at the human rights violations that happened in the facilities that they had invested in. In 2026, this particular company is projected to increase their profits another $290 million, reaching about $2.5 billion in revenue. So together, these companies are expected to see revenues of over $5.5 billion. And that's $5.5 billion of taxpayer money because their primary generation of revenue comes from government contracts, which is taxpayer money. So why should you support this? These companies are paid via these taxpayer dollars, and this tax in this bill would return public money to the public rather than padding the pockets of the elite class. You should support this because using REITs as a loophole for this purpose feels like the activities of fraudsters to most average people if you ask them, given that the average person defines fraud as something that's somewhat subjective, but is in most cases what they see as a misuse of taxpayer dollars. It's commonly considered morally corrupt to profit off human suffering, constitutional and civil rights violations, which is another reason this makes the average person see this as a misuse of taxpayer dollars. The average person sees the exploitation of labor as wrong, and we find that in these centers, the labor has been exploited to as little as $1 a day, while we are told that folks have jobs and opportunities for educations in these facilities. Additionally, these facilities are temporary, right? This is going to end when Congress flips, or when Trump's gone, or if they deport everyone. Well, then what? Then what will they use these facilities for that taxpayers have paid for? There's 11 to 14 million unauthorized folks allegedly in the country, but they paid $96.7 billion in taxes. How do we make up for that? and all the money that's going to this elite class. There's 52 million Americans who are born abroad. They pay $1.2 trillion in taxes. So if the mission continues as they build this network of warehouses across the country as they have said, to move humans like Amazon moves packages, as they said, we're going to see that all of that tax revenue is lost as well, while we're still footing the bill for these facilities and the utilities that go into them as well. So if we're really serious about the responsible use of taxpayer dollars, this is a great place to start. We can capture hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars from white-collar fraudsters that are referred to that way by the average person. But if you don't support this, and I think the question still stands, why would we support taxpayer money being wasted on corporate welfare when there's veterans, children, families, and people right here in Minnesota who could really use that money back in their pocket, like a lot of other fraud attempts are looking to do? So that is my bill, Madam Chair, and I will turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Representative Hanson. There are no there are no testifiers who've signed up. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify on House File 3909? Please come on up. If you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself for the record as you get started with your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
My apologies, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, just state your name for the record as you get started with your testimony. Thank you.
Sure, my name is Nancy Fitzsimmons. I'm a professor of social work at Minnesota State University, Mankato, and I reside in North Mankato, and I did not anticipate doing this today. March is Social Work Month. Today is Social Work Day at the Capitol. I'm here with hundreds of social workers, some of them my students. What I'd like to say to this issue is this. Social workers across Minnesota step into all of the hard things impacting Minnesotans, regardless of where they live, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of ideology, regardless of who you vote for, regardless of whether you vote. Our work isn't political. We don't ask people about their politics. We meet people where they are at, in hospitals, in schools, in nursing homes, at counties, and disability service provider organizations, and correctional facilities, all over this state. Increasingly, we are asked to do more and more with less. While we listen to and know of extreme amounts of money being made just to make more money, to line the pockets of the few, while we continue to toil and do the hard work for all of you, for all of Minnesotans. It just seems to me that perhaps this is a measure to generate a small amount of money to give back to Minnesotans and to help us to just do a little bit more for the people across Minnesota who are struggling and who will continue to struggle. And we as social workers are going to just keep stepping up because that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Simmons, for your testimony and for reminding us of, the choices and what is at stake when we talk about our finances in the state. We appreciate you being here. And we also appreciate your students being here. Will the students just give a wave? All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Future social workers, future heroes over there. You may not know that Representative Hanson is also a social worker, so it's appropriate that you're here today. Thank you so much. All right, is there anybody else present who wishes to testify? Not seeing any, we'll go to member discussion. Chair Swedzinski.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Hanson, for this bill. While I'm not going to speak to the ICE portion of the comments, but I am going to speak to the economic impact of facilities across rural Minnesota, an area that I do represent, that potentially this bill could impact. That's the city of Appleton. That community is just north of my district, just across the La Caprella River. The reservoir there that's been created as water retention, but also a recreational spot that many people across the state enjoy. And, you know, as this conversation has happened over the years, I've been in this place for 16 years. And since 2010, the facility that could potentially house over 1,300 people has been closed. And while we talk about corporate profits, we talk about the economic engines of rural Minnesota, we cannot and should not discount the jobs that would actually be created, whether it's owned by a private entity, whether this facility in Appleton would be owned by the public, if we could sell it to the state of Minnesota or South Dakota. We do have a need for prisons. We do have a need for retention. And I'm for an all-above approach when it comes to reopening the facility in Appleton, when it comes to job creation and local economic opportunity. You know, regardless of the debate of why or when or who or why, but I'd be remiss to say and to allow the comments to continue, but these places are important. It's important to my area of the state, and I would look at unique ways that we could potentially have this place used. Rather than build new facilities in Minnesota, I believe that the state of Minnesota should be looking at the purchase of the Appleton prison when it comes to purchasing, whether it's used for whatever reason. We are a nation of laws, and when we enforce laws and not the rule of men, we are better off. And so, yeah, so that's what I'm going to say. And I would ask that this bill doesn't be included in a bill. Because we want to allow any single door, we don't want to close any door for that facility, whatever that might be. So that's that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Swedzinski. Representative Hanson, did you have anything, or do you want me to go to the next member?
Sure, I can just mention that. I think, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the comment. Obviously, that's your community. I expected you to have comments about that. Appleton, that site is owned by Core Civic, who again has been divested from America's most trusted banks, where most of your constituents probably have their checking accounts and everything. Even their own banks don't trust Core Civic with their money, and I think that's valuable. So I do hope that any conversations that happen in your community include your community members and talk to them about that, because I think they deserve a voice in that as that happens, because their tax dollars will be subsidizing that work. And I know you're concerned about the proper use of taxpayer dollars, and I think they would be interested in having that conversation too. And so as you know, and I'd be happy to join you at that to talk to them about how their tax dollars are not used appropriately by Core Civic, and how even, like I said, the most trusted banks in America and on the planet don't trust Core Civic with their money either.
Thank you, Representative Hanson. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I think my comments I want to offer is just kind of the asking folks to like step back and think about like what we do here in this committee and at the legislature. I think our goal is always to make life better for Minnesotans, folks in our districts and across the state. So it's devastating whenever a local industry leaves or dies. And, you know, my thing is always like, we can have a better offer, right? Like, I don't think people raise their kids to want to work at jails, right? Like, I think we can offer Minnesota students something better. And so, you know, something that we've been thinking about is also, right, like how do we make sure that students in Minnesota are trained to, you know, live and work in a digital future, right? And what does that look like? Are our kids ready? Are there new industries that we can look to bring to all parts of Minnesota? And so I would just offer that like this doesn't have to be the only choice for people in Appleton or Mankato or in St. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Hanson, for bringing this forward. I think as we think about this as a policy, the financial implications that we have already seen from Operation Metro Surge have been huge, and I anticipate they will only get greater. I'm thinking particularly about a constituent of mine who was detained and has been sent to Texas. He did commit a crime, and he served his time for it, and that was 20 years ago. He has since reformed. He was the breadwinner for his family. He was married. He was a loving father and stepfather. Several of his kids were special needs, and he was providing for them. And now we are going to be in a situation where his wife and his children, who are U.S. citizens, are still living in St. Paul and now need resources from the state in order to continue moving forward and living healthy, productive lives. I think when we think about folks being removed from their families, from their communities, it's incumbent upon us to think about the cost to the community and also just the financial cost to the state. I 100% anticipate seeing an increase of people needing state resources, relying on those, and us having to provide them because they are U.S. citizens, right? You can detain and deport the person who is undocumented, but you can't do that to the people who are U.S. citizens. And so I really actually think, we talk a lot about revenue and how we need to figure out how to pay for the things that our people need. And this is a way to do that. So more than a punishment or a deterrence, I'm looking at this as how are we going to make up the difference when those 4 kids need medical assistance, SNAP benefits, probably therapy because they've had their parent ripped away from them. And that's going to be a real concern. And it's a real concern because it ties into our concept of public safety. We know people who have less stable home lives are more likely to commit crimes in the future. And even if they do that, then we will have to be housing them and feeding them, which costs money also, right? And so, we could potentially end this by not detaining people who are functioning members of our society, but since we have chosen to not do that at this time, I think this is a reasonable solution. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my point here is more, not so much a question, but a statement. From my findings or what I'm looking at here, there is no private detention center in Minnesota at this time, nor is there any entities that are potentially even planning to open. So to say that this bill would generate revenue is probably kind of maybe an incorrect statement. But the other question or thought that I have here is I don't know that we have any other industries in this state where we tax them at 50% of gross revenue. I mean, that to me, we talked about carving out things yesterday. This, would we do it for the chip manufacturers? Would we do it for the film industry? Some of them that I mentioned yesterday. We incentivize things to a certain extent, but 50% of gross revenue, I mean, we talked about politicizing taxes yesterday, and that's exactly what this is. So that's my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Weiner. There is a revenue estimate in your packet, and so you can look and see the assumptions. The revenue analysis details always where the good stuff is printed, as we all know on the tax committee. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to give you some numbers here. The federal government has spent $38 billion to kind of build a network of distribution centers. And again, this is the reason for this was to build logistic hubs, really just right outside of large city centers. About an hour to 45 minutes is what we're seeing as the trend around the country right now. These buildings cost between $100 to $150 million each. They were originally designed to house like distribution things. So they have like lots of bay doors, concrete floors, things like that. So they end up costing a lot of money to refurbish as well, because, if you're thinking of a detention facility, having 100 bay doors doors for semi-trucks doesn't really scream security, and so they usually have to brick over those doors, which costs money. And because of the concrete slabs that most of them sit on, it costs extreme amounts of money to put in plumbing, electricity, and so even the cost of the buildings grow to be even more. So there's currently, the goal right now, according to the government, is to have 24 facilities running by the end of 2026, which even CoreCivic and Geo Group say is way too ambitious. They don't think that they can keep up with that. So we've seen that in Georgia, for example, there's one that just went outside about 45 minutes east of Atlanta that can house 8,500 people. And the locals there overwhelmingly voted for Trump and are pro-ICE and MAGA. And they have said loud and clear and are making a pretty big stink about it that they do not want this in their backyard. So NIMBY of politics does actually come into this regardless of who you vote for, even if it's something that they tend to support on that side of the aisle or in that ideology. They don't want it in their backyard because they know that it can bring other issues. We've seen Congress folks in Tennessee, New Hampshire, and Mississippi, primarily Republican federal leaders who are striking deals with CoreCivic and Geo Group to stop the establishment of these facilities in their cities. So there are politics is involved whether we like it or not, which is why I mentioned what I did at the beginning and asking us to sit in our Minnesotan values and be able to operate in like some real clear discernment here. And then I think the last thing I would say to that is that I understand that no other industry may be taxed at 50%, but I'm not in the interest, and at least the constituents who sent me here, and I would imagine all the constituents who sent you here are not, did not send you here to submit to the elites. They asked you to stand for them. And I think that when we talk about like what Representative Hollins mentioned, that we have to stand with them in understanding how these costs all kind of play out. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul and act like it's not happening. And so I don't think we should abandon our voters on that and bow down to the elites by just not taxing them as much as they want. They're making more money than any of us here can ever comprehend, ever, right? When we talk about someone who's making billions of dollars, like do the math on that, divide that by 12, look at how much money that is a month, and then remember that like billions are unfathomable numbers and trillions are even more. We're on course to have the first trillionaires in the country, and I'm not really wanting it to be in my legacy to help contribute to quadrillionaires ever in my life. So.
Thank you, Representative Hanson. Is there anybody else who has a Representative Harder?
Thank you, Chair Gomez. My question is, how did you arrive at a 50% tax?
Representative Hanson?
Thank you, Chair, and that's a good question. There's two other states, Washington and California, who are exploring this, so just kind of started there, but I'm obviously open to conversation about it. Philosophically, I think if we can agree that there's this offset that we don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul or give the elites something when we know that our constituents are struggling and we could reinvest that money in our counties to reduce property tax dollars, to cover the state grant gap. I wrote down a couple other things. We could give the PGA tax-free events here at some time.
Chair Davids.
Chair Davids, we could, resort owners were looking for that tax break. This is the money that we could do to literally answer the call of every bill we've heard. This is the kind of money that could fund something like that. And not a single person in this room, and I would argue not a single person anyone in this room knows or has 6 degrees of connection to, would be affected, right? So, if Blackwater can fund our future the right way they should by not robbing us of the tax dollars that should be in our coffers, I think we should take an opportunity to do that. That's the 50%. But if we wanted to do 48.9, I'm fine with that too.
Representative Harder?
Thank you, Chair Gomez. That's interesting, 50% a tax rate to the people of Minnesota. I just want to remind the committee, I guess, my tax rate for my farming operation last year was over 50%. Okay, in my mind, personally, that's considered theft. I mean, I consider that to be sort of excessive, and there's probably a number of reasons why my tax rate was over 50%. But it just does seem a little excessive, and is this the way that the state of Minnesota wants to go, is to keep increasing? I do not consider myself elite or a millionaire or anything along that line, but I'm just letting you know that 50% is really hard to see, just based upon the fact that my farming operation, the tax rate last year was over 50%. Thank you.
Representative Hanson?
Thank you, Chair. And Representative Harder, you are not an elite. You're a farmer. You are a core part of what my party considers part of our values, right? We are the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And I think if we taxed BlackRock like this, I could give you a tax break. That's the reality of what this looks like. And again, we don't need to be partisan about this. Like, without farmers, without, businesses in small towns like Appleton, without, businesses like this, like, we can't generate any revenue. But we should not be robbed by huge billionaire corporations, again, the financial cabal of the planet that even the most reputable banks and trusted banks on the planet don't trust their money with. We should not trust them with our money either, nor our constituents' money. So taxpayers are the ones giving them this money. And I've heard in the Fraud Committee, public dollars should stay with the public. And I think that's a really good mantra to apply to this too. This is public money that is going into this, and it should come back to us at least in some way, shape, or form. If you want a 20% tax on billionaires, sure. We can negotiate on the number. I think the number is a distraction, honestly, if we just obsess about that. But if the principle of taxing these companies that are profiting off of taxpayer dollars in order to make sure you don't have to pay as much, that we have jobs we can create in Appleton, that we have all of these things that the state of Minnesota needs, I think that's a worthy conversation.
All right. Representative Harder, anything further?
I'm fine, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Representative Robbins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Hanson. I know you pointed to me in that last statement, and I just want to point out for the record that I do not consider these to be public dollars, and I have never said that, and I never will. These are the tax dollars of hard-working Minnesotans, and we should not treat them like our piggy bank. These are the people's dollars, and I just want to be very clear that I do not consider, nor have I ever said that they're public tax dollars.
I'll go to Representative Hanson, but I thought she might have been gesturing toward Representative Anderson, who has said repeatedly public dollars should remain in public hands, and she and I happen to agree on that. But
Yeah.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you. And I think I was just mentioning in the conversation in general that happens in your committee and just recognizing that conversation happens. But I think I just heard you say that, and everything you said, I was like, yeah, I agree. Because public dollars, taxpayer dollars, however you want to call it, I mean, potato. Tax revenue, at the end of the day, these corporations, this financial cabal is making money off of government contracts. That's government money, that's taxpayer money. I mean, we can't deny that, right? And we know that if our most trusted financial institutions don't trust their money with them, why do we trust so much and leaving so much of our taxpayer money with them?
Thank you. Anything further, Representative Robbins?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there any, before we go to Chair Davids, any further discussion? Not seeing any. Chair Davids.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair. Something my good friend Representative Hanson said was that somebody's bowing down to the elites. I'm elite, obviously, but I don't bow down to anyone because my SI joint is still not fully healed. It really hurts.
Good, don't do it.
But more importantly, Madam Chair, we are so blessed today to have some high school pages, and this is important for the tax committee because we need to know their name, who their legislator is, in this order, name, legislator, what high school you go to, and what your team name is. So let's start. Could you stand up, high school pages? So let's start right here.
Oh, okay. My name is Ollie Grotsky. My legislator is Hollins.
All right.
I go to. Oh, hello, hi. I go to Como Park High School, and we're the Cougars.
Cougars, yeah.
So my name is Yolanda Cisneros. My legislator is Chris Wadinsky, and I go to Yellow Medicine East High School in Granite Falls, Minnesota.
What's team name?
What's my team name?
Sting.
Why me? I'm Grace Oliver. My legislator is Lisa P. Smith. I think is her last name. I go to St. John's Preparatory in College Room.
What's their team name? Like the Johnnies?
St. John's, the Johnnies.
Johnnies, okay.
I'm Claire Damon. My representative is Representative Green. I go to Edina High School and board the Hornets.
Hornets.
My name is Satora Renasinga. I'm from Eagan, Minnesota. I go to Eagan High School. Our team name is the Wildcats, and my legislator is Liz Ryers, I think.
All right.
My name is Brianna. My representative is Ken Hicks. I go to Shaker Academy in Rochester, and our mascot's the Lions. My name's Lydia. My representative is Erica Schwartz, and I go to Nicollet High School, and we're the Raiders. Hi, my name's Sadie Taylor. My representative is Michael Howard, and I go to Gilsell High School, and go Islanders.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Wonderful, thank you. Any further comments about private prisons, or are we just going to stay on? High school mascots are more fun, aren't they?
Much, yes.
Thank you.
No other comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hanson, any closing comments for us?
Well, thank you. I appreciate everybody keeping an open mind today. You can go ahead and go back to our corners if we need to for the rest of the political session. But I do invite us to listen and heed the words of what we heard from NASW and really remember what we are here to do is to serve. We could fund these folks' schools over here entirely, right? All of their youth sports, every mascot could operate with tax dollars that we could collect from this. So just think of the wish list of things that you would like to fund in your communities, those water treatment plants, those bonding bills, the HEAPR requests we have from higher education, so many things that our counties need, property tax relief, and more could be funded with a tax like this. So thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Hanson. With that, House File 3909 is laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill. All right. Finally, House File 3659, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead and present your bill.
Well, I go to Waikea High School, and my mascot's the Warriors. That was like 25 years ago. Sorry, it's just too fun. Thank you, Chair Gomez, Chair Davids, and members of the committee. I'm here today to present House File 3659 to urge you to ensure that federal agents who are deployed in Minnesota to engage in immigration enforcement pay Minnesota income taxes for the time that they lived and worked here. Operation Metro Surge and other federal immigration enforcement efforts required an inordinate amount of state and local resources. Minnesota taxpayers fund the roads that these agents drove on, the public safety systems they relied on, the courts that had to process thousands of habeas petitions which were filed in response to their reckless behavior, and the general infrastructure that supported their presence. Local governments across the state incurred hundreds of thousands of dollars in administrative and public safety costs associated with their deployment. Without requiring state income from those who caused those costs, Minnesotans will effectively subsidize a federal enforcement operation that they did not request and that many do not support. Moreover, enforcing this requirement sends an important message. Minnesota will not allow its tax base to be eroded by temporary federal deployments that shift costs onto our communities. If federal agents choose to conduct extended operations here, they should do so in a way that respects our laws and our fiscal structure. Our state invests in strong schools, reliable infrastructure, public health systems, beautiful parks and green spaces, and it also contributes to local governments through CPA and LGA. These investments are sustained by local taxpayers who meet their obligations. Federal agents who have infiltrated our communities should not be treated differently. Thank you for your consideration, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify on House File 3659 before we go to member discussion? Not seeing any. Member discussion. All right, Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Davids, Representative Hollins. Would this apply to the people who may have earned income that were protesting?
Representative Hollins.
For Minnesota residents, they already pay income taxes. And the other, if there was anybody, protesters aren't paid for doing that work, so they don't have to pay income taxes on protesting. That's like asking me if you knit, do you have to pay taxes on your knitting?
Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. I think my question is, if they were paid, whether they're a resident or not, would this bill apply to them?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. That's an interesting question. I suppose by the way it's written, well, so first of all, there aren't paid protesters. That is a fallacy. Trust me, nobody is out there in negative degree weather. It's not fun, it's not interesting. But if there were, I don't think that would, just because of the way it's written, it's for immigration enforcement efforts, and so that would not apply. But if you wanted to bring a bill like that, I mean, good.
All right, Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Gomez, and thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. That was an interesting question to definitely perk my ears. I would love if Representative Harder or anyone on the other side has proof of these paid protesters that have been alleged over and over and over again over the past many months. And I have to say, it is incredibly offensive to even suggest that protesters or people expressing their constitutional rights are doing so out because they're being paid. In my community, I dropped my fifth grader off at school this morning. Every morning when I pull out, there are people on each corner with whistles guarding our school for the safety of their kids that go to the school because repeatedly ICE has targeted those school districts. It is incredibly offensive to suggest, even inkle or suggest that those folks are doing so because they're paid. In my community, in communities all across the state, it is parents, senior citizens, regular folks, the 50,000 people that marched in our streets in 20 below degree weather saying this is not okay. They did so because they care for their neighbors, not for a paycheck. And it's incredibly offensive to suggest anything other than what is the truth, that Minnesotans care for each other. That's why they're out in the streets.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Chair Davids?
Nothing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Hollins, any final comments for us? Oh, I forgot to move the bill. Representative Hollins is going to move that her bill be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill. Representative Hollins, any final comments for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the brief discussion. I urge clear enforcement and reporting mechanisms to ensure that non-resident federal personnel who participate in immigration efforts pay their fair share of income tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. And with that, Representative Hollins will renew her motion that House File 3659 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill, and it is laid over. All right, our next meeting will be Thursday, March 5th, 2026. Chair Davids has the gavel. Any previews for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We'll be hearing a presentation from the Association of Minnesota Counties and the Minnesota Inter-County Association, and then we'll be hearing House File 3396, Property Tax Task Force Established and Report Required.
Who's the author of that one?
The elite.
Excellent. We look forward to that. All right, there being nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned.